Hello everyone, it's DuckFaden07. Today we are playing 5-color Rhinos. Okay, so, but with a twist. So, we'll go to the main first. Okay, so, in the main we have Furies, we have Leyline Bindings, Scion of Dracos, Lórien Revealed instead of some lands. Subtlety, this card has been really good, one of the best cards in a deck. It's just unbelievable how relevant this card is in a lot of matchups. Of course, Fire Ice, a staple for the Rhino builds, 8 Cascade spells, and the Fable of Mirror Breaker. Fable of Mirror Breaker is a card I found. This deck is pretty good against Scam, one of the best decks in the format, against a Red-Black Scam, which is very popular deck, one of the best in the format, or maybe the best. And the Fable of the Mirror Breaker is a card that really helps a lot in that matchup, more than most other cards. And it is also a red card for Fury, so we have to be careful about the pitch count. Having 15, it's pretty good, and I would rather have Fable than any other playable red card in the deck at the moment. I think this variant, thanks to the Scion of Draco, Subtlety in the main, Fury in the main, Fire Ice doesn't really need more 1-mana removals. And instead of dedicating slots to Dead Gones or whatever, I've just chosen to play Subtlety in the main and with the Fury, because we are playing all this in the main in this variant, because we have 4 Up the Beanstalks in the sideboard. So I'm using Up the Beanstalk to beat all of the 4-color Rhinos hard matchups. That include 4-color Omnat, that includes Murktide. Also can be used against Shadow decks, which are also pretty tricky, and can be used against Amulet Titan. Okay, so I had different versions of this build. You can check it, most of them, on my Twitter profile. But this is my latest build and my final build for this archetype. So for Beanstalks, we will see how relevant were they and where did I bring them in. And I think I played Rhinos a lot, and I had problems with some matchups, and I was thinking about how to solve those matchups for a deck. And I'm Beanstalk in the sideboard really helps a lot in the really tough matchups for this deck at the moment. So for the 4-color matchup, you will see my sideboarding choices as we play. But in that matchups, I board in 4 Beanstalks and I bring out 3 Crashing Footfalls. I leave 1 just to have more Cascade targets, because that matchup can really go grindy. I don't want to run out of the Cascade matchups. And so that's it. So let's go to the gameplay and see how this played out. I played the league, finished 5-0, my first trophy of the season, and we will start with the match that was usually match number 3, but it was a 4-color matchup, and I want to immediately show you how Beanstalk impacted that match. Okay, so I started first there. It was a pretty mediocre hand, so I had to go Overgrown Tomb, fetch me a Raugrin Triome, and then I wasn't able to play the Scion on turn 2, but had to cycle another Lórien to get a land so I can play the Shardless. And okay, so I decided to go for it. Play my Shardless Agent. And yeah, they went for the Leyline Binding here, taking my Rhino token. Opponent then goes for Teferi, it takes my other Rhino token, but luckily I had Shardless on the field to try to finish this Teferi. It was still fine. I decided to play my Fable. Next turn, if I don't kill the Teferi with Goblin Shaman, I still have Leyline Binding, have Fire Ice. I decide to get rid of these two. Do some redraws, but opponent has Fire Ice to get rid of my Goblin Shaman. Still, I was again in a decent situation. I played the Leyline Binding, get rid of Teferi, and play my other Shardless, and again put Rhinos on the field. I have plenty of power, plus Scion of Draco in hand. Okay, my opponent on 4 cards at this moment. just passing the turn, not doing anything. And I was, yeah, it was pretty good position for me at this moment. I top decked a Violent Outburst, so I could go for another land. Opponent pitch cast the Solitude. Unfortunately, they have Boseiju to bring their Teferi back. I wanted to do the Outburst thing before the damage because it seemed like it could be very relevant. It is theoretically 3 damage, or in this situation 2 damage, which puts a lot of pressure on them for the next turn. Our opponent also has Fire Ice, and at this moment they have 0 cards in hand, and now they top deck. They use now they top deck Wrenn 6 to get Boseiju back from their graveyard, which was very relevant in situation when I had Scion of Draco and the Shardless Agent on the field. So I went with Shardless on Teferi, Scion to the face. Opponent plays another Boseiju, and I kill the Teferi, and so I was able to cast another Outburst. So I have done pretty much everything I can. Opponent just had the nuts. They had another Teferi, and they still had Boseiju. I top deck my 4th Rhinos, going all face, leaving my opponent on 2 life. They go to 1 and then top deck Omnat, which is pretty crazy draws like Teferi into Omnat. And I cycled this one, find the Fable. And yeah, at this point they can gain even more life, so there is no point attacking them. I just go for the Teferi here. I cast my Fable and pass the turn, hoping they don't continue top decking insane stuff. So they play another fetch, gain more life, and of course they find another ring into another Beanstalk. I gotta say this has been pretty nuts draws from the opponent. And yeah, so opponent survived on 1 life, and from this point I had this was another attack just to try to kill the Omnat, but opponent also top decked the Ephemerate. If I killed like the Omnat here, I still wouldn't have any chance, but some mathematic this way it was totally over. So yeah, that was it. Let's check out game 2. So post board, I brought in the Beans and left 1 Crashing Footfalls in, as I explained, just to have additional Cascade targets because the matchups can get really grindy. Okay, so post board, I got the Beans in the deck and keep a pretty good hand. Subtlety is definitely card you want in this matchup. And the Beanstalk, you really want to have Beanstalk on turn 2. This kind of hands are probably the best. Okay, so here I start with the Breeding Pool. I immediately get the Vents. Get the second Subtlety, resolve the Beanstalk, and I definitely feel like I'm in a good situation at the moment. I have a double Shardless Agent, so I don't care if they use the Dovin's Veto at this point. I just go for the Shardless, force them to play spells. They go for the Veto, but it is fine. I still have I have more of the Cascade spells. I have ways to abuse. This one's as shocking. The Temple Garden start attacking my opponent. This time I decide to use to hold the mana for the Subtlety hard cast. This way I was able to continue attacking them for a significant amount of damage. And now I top deck another Subtlety, and this situation is just so great. I don't even need to cast anything. Just wait until they try to do something, and then finish them with Subtlety or Force or Leyline Binding. So many options. So they try to resolve Teferi. I have another Subtlety, and that's it. That is the game. I have Lethal in the swingback, and opponent concedes. Okay, pretty easy game, and we will now see the Beanstalk in action in the game 3. where it was very relevant. I kept a slower hand, but this is fine considering my game plan in the last match, in the last game of this match. Okay, so they try to resolve the Beanstalk. So the winner of this match is whoever has the more Beanstalks. So you have to counter the Beanstalk. That is the first thing I needed to do is done. I got rid of the Beanstalks, and I really want to force them and not binding them, because if you're binding them, then they still get to redraw. So it feels a lot worse. Okay, I went for the Heat here. I passed the turn. Opponent doesn't do anything. So I just fetch and then Island Cycle. I have double binding and the Fury. So my game plan is just to wait until the late game. Hopefully I get more beans on the field than opponent, and then try to win that way. Opponent is also playing pretty carefully because they seen the Rhinos, they seen the Beanstalks, so they're probably not sure what to expect at this moment. A Subtlety, great top deck. Opponent goes for the One Ring, which is fine because I have two bindings. In hand, they try to draw immediately. I use the ring. I use the binding, sorry, to exile the ring and prevent them from redrawing. And yeah, okay, so I decide to shock in the Vents, so I'm able to hold both Subtlety and Binding for their turn. Again, opponent goes for a Teferi, and they're probably holding like Doing Vetoes at this point, so I go for the Subtlety, and they put Teferi on top of their library and pitch cast a Fury to kill my Subtlety, which feels really good. They're on 2 cards at this point. And yeah, okay, so I cast my Scion of Draco. Opponent has 2 cards in hand, Teferi on top of the library, and I'm still hoping to try to find that Beans. I have 2 cards in hand that trigger it. I decided to not to hold the Scion but play it. I was expecting them to play the Teferi and bounce the Scion anyway. And once I get the Beans on the field, all these cards in hand will help me get me another cards. And I finally find the Outburst. This means I can play the Beanstalk instant speed. I thought like they're probably holding the Darwin's Veto, so I'm going to try to wait until they tap out. And they did tap out for the Solitude, and this is my opportunity. So I finally resolved the Beanstalk, and I got another Scion, so I don't really care about them exiling this one. And I don't want to use the binding on the Solitude. I want to Fury the Solitude if possible. Opponent goes for the One Ring again, and luckily I didn't use the binding this time. Opponent goes for the attacks and chooses not to use the One Ring on their turn, but to wait for my turn. Okay, and here it is, another Beanstalk. Opponent tries to tap the ring in response. I prevent them from drawing and draw 1 card of my own. Then resolve my second Beanstalk. And also got the Shardless Agent. And resolve my third Beanstalk. And yeah, that is it. Now, at this point, they can have all the rings they want. I have 4 Beanstalks and I'm unbeatable at the moment. I think they probably still have that Doin's Veto in hand. I played intentionally slower this game because of my game plan and what I was trying to do. and I knew that I don't need to hurry this matchup, don't need to tempo out my opponent. I can just play a slow game and outvalue them, and I did exactly that. And when I found my cascade spells to help me resolve the beans, then the beans start coming one after another, and that is it. At this point, I just kill them very quickly with Scion of Draco's, Furies, Subtleties, and that is the game. Okay, so let's now start from the beginning on the match one. I wanted to show this one first because it was example of the matchup where I board in the beans. And okay, so this matchup I played against the 4-color Rhinos, and I had to mulligan to 4 cards, keeping just 3 lands and Fire Ice. Opponent started with the Gemstone Covers. I also used the Beanstalk from the sideboard in the Murktide matchup. In the Shadow matchup, I had a few different variants of this deck. I played Solitude at one point, and I also used that variant against Amulet matchup. It was pretty good there. I would have to test more for this one. And this game was pretty bad. I mulligan to 4, opponent disputing my Fire Ice, me drawing Footfalls, and the 4th land. It was just terrible hand. It doesn't get much worse than this. Opponent had the typical hand, suspending Rhinos here, and Outburst into Rhinos, and I get to draw another card, and it's another land, and at this point it's game over. I concede. They play another Rhinos, and that's it. I can't get back from this. Okay, so let's check out the game 2 against Rhinos. Now I was playing first, so a completely different story. I suspend Crashing Footfalls on turn 1. Opponent does the same. And I have 2 Cascade spells and a Fable. Pretty happy about this. So, I was careful about Blood Moon. But I got Forest and the Island already. Opponent has a Fable. Opponent has, sorry, Ice to ice my land on their turn, and I pass the turn, but I have a Force of Negation in case they try to resolve Shardless and the Footfalls on their turn. Now I also choose to just pass the turn, and opponent cycles the Lórien Revealed, and I use this situation to try to resolve my Footfalls, and I did it. They probably needed the land or didn't have any other options, but this was definitely a window for me to resolve my Rhinos, and I had another Rhinos on suspend here, another Shardless in hand, and a Force of Negation, so it's a pretty good situation for me. It was my turn 5, which means I had my second Rhinos resolved with a Force of Negation backup. And at this point, I decided just to hold my Force of Negation. They had Rhinos resolving on their turn, so I just went for the Force, tried to counter this, and I did it, and the opponent concedes the game. Guess they didn't have anything to stop me from killing them next turn. And that was it. So let's check out game 2. Game 3, sorry. Okay, so let's see how I sideboarded for the Rhinos matchup. Basically, I just used forces instead of subtleties. This version of Timur Rhinos doesn't play that many creatures, so subtleties are not relevant as against those older versions playing borrowers, fury, lot of borrowers, furies. Their subtleties, they only have like probably Subtlety and a couple of Murktides here. Okay, opponent. I used the Fire Ice and they didn't even have the third land, so I just went for the Foothills on my turn and resolved them, which was pretty good for me. Opponent then finds the land they were looking for. And yeah, okay, so now it was a game again. Opponent doesn't do anything on their turn, just passes the turn, and I was too careful this game. I did a mistake, and I wanted to play around Moon as best as possible, and this ended up almost costing me the game because now I didn't have the second blue source and also didn't have the second red source, which was extremely awkward. So it was definitely bad play, a mistake. I was too careful trying to play around Blood Moon with fetching forest plus plains, and yeah, almost very costly mistake. Opponent now pitchcasts the Fury and cast the Outburst on their own. I wasn't able to use my force because I didn't have the second blue. So now I didn't find the land, so I was also forced to just pitchcast the Fury, kill one of their Rhinos, attack with another one, and use this situation to attack with Shardless Agent also. So they had to like block the Rhino, so it was a free attack with the Shardless. So I now suspend my Rhinos. And this game was very long, and these suspended Rhinos really ended up mattering. And now I had the Shardless, but didn't have much else in hand to do on this turn to continue pressuring my opponent, which was in a kind of difficult situation. Opponent then resolves the Rhinos, and at this point they were at a better situation. I still had Rhinos on suspend and really needed this land. I finally got it, so I was able to hardcast my Fury, kill one of their Rhinos, and have Fury to trade with the second Rhino if needed. It was a bit risky not blocking the Rhino and saving the Fury for the attacks because they had Shardless 4 Chump next turn, plus then getting another attack with Rhino, which is very close to lethal. I decide to trade with Fury, and when I got another land, I decided just to hold the Force of Negation this turn. And just hoping for this Crashing Footfalls to resolve, which then puts me in a better situation. I decided to counter the Flame of Fener. Obviously they were struggling with the draws and hoping to find something. So I decided to counter this. They get another land. And now I resolve my suspended Footfalls. I tried to resolve the suspended Footfalls. Opponent has the Force of Negation. They decide to pitch cast it. So I was a bit afraid of Subtlety here, but they ended up not having it. And now I had Fury on the field, threatening the lethal next turn, and pretty good situation. Opponent uses the Bone Crusher plus Dead God to kill my Fury. I got the Scion of Draco from the top, and this means opponent has to have another top deck to get rid of the Scion. They didn't get it, and that was the game against Rhinos. Okay, so let's check out match 3. Opponent starts off with Preordain, Mishra's Bubble. I top deck a Scion, but I wasn't able to play this on turn 2, so I was just holding the Lórien for the next turn to get me a Steam Vents so I can play the Shardless probably next turn. Opponent plays the Bloodstone Mire, which meant they're on some kind of Grixis build. Okay, so I assume the opponent is holding the Drowning Lock at this situation. So I decided to go for the Scion of Draco. They can't drown this, and they can drown my Crashing Footfalls. So I decided to go for the Scion, hold the Binding, and I think this was a good strategy. Opponent uses the Totsis to get rid of the Binding, and now I'm able to start attacking with Scion. I got myself another land, and now I don't have much to do. I potentially can cast the Fury next turn or just hold for the Subtlety. So I decide to go for it this turn. I actually resolved the Rhinos. They didn't have us. They said that they fetched wrongly. So I was right. They probably had the Drowning Lock, and they just fetched the wrong land, and they weren't able to use it. And they conceded after that punt. So that was it. Okay, let's check out the game 2. I had to mulligan this one, obviously, and I kept a decent 6. I have turn 2 Scion, turn 3 Violent Outburst. Let's check out how I sideboarded this matchup. So I wasn't really sure what is my opponent playing. I didn't see anything, so I wasn't sure if this is a shadow build or it is a control build. The control build with the Flame of Feiners, Dimir builds with the splashing Flame of Feiners have been played recently by Young Dingo, so I assumed maybe it's maybe that. So I wasn't exactly sure how to do the sideboarding in this match because I didn't have all the informations I needed. So I decided to put in the Force of Negation and ditched some Furies, ditched some Subtleties, some Fables, and that's it. If I knew this was a Shadow, I would probably just board it in a bit differently. I also need a bit more experience with this deck to be able to like 100% be sure what I want to do here with the sideboarding, because the Beanstalk might also be just a better option here in this matchup than the actual Rhinos, especially post board when they have the explosives and the Flusterstorm. So I think if I knew what was this deck I was playing against, for sure, I would probably just go with Beans post board instead of Rhinos. I think this would be an easy game with the Beans. Just every side, once you resolve them, they can't remove it. They don't have enchantment removal. It's a nightmare for them. The only thing they can do is engineer the explosives for 2, and then every Scion you play, every Binding you play, every Fury, Lórien draws you additional cards, and that is the nightmare for this type of controlish builds. And okay, so definitely would add Beans if I had more experience with this build and if I knew exactly what I was playing against. Okay, so let's go on to the next match. I think Beans post board are ideal for the matchups like this. Slower matchups, especially when they try to wait post board with the counters, with the Fluster Storms, Engineered Explosives, a Chalice of the Voids, whatever. My fourth opponent was playing 5-color Reanimator, the Atraxa one. I didn't have much hate for them in the game 1, so I didn't have a lot to do except for turn 2 Scion. Opponent immediately has Goryos, so they resolve the Atraxa ability. They get the Ephemerate, they find the Ephemerates and immediately attack me for 7. Ephemerates the Atraxa. Get a lot more cards, then pitch cast the Grief. They also find yeah, they leave me with Fury because Fury is not really impactful in right now. So that was it. I basically conceded on the next turn and didn't have much chance after the start like this. So in the game 2, let's see what I sideboarded in. I have a lot of sideboards cards for this matchup. I have 3 Endurance and 4 Force of Negations in the side. And they have been, they're all just pretty relevant in this matchup. Mostly 1 Endurance, 1 Force can easily win you a game like this. So I pass the turn. Opponent luckily decides to fetch, so I'm able to just fire their, ice their land. And try to find myself a third land so I can go for the Rhinos. Okay, so classic Rhino start. Tap their land. When you're on the play, tap their land, then resolve the Shardless on turn 3. And now my opponent, it's really have a hard time dealing with all of this. This is a 2-turn clock. Opponent pitch casts the Grief and plays the Fable. I go top deck another blue card, which was relevant for the Force of Negation. I go for another Rhinos to pump my team. Additional damage can be relevant, especially if they resolve the Atraxa next turn. So they bin the 2 Atraxas. They go pitch cast Grief, see my hand, and concede when they saw my hand. I'm not sure what exactly they had. Okay, so same sideboard in the game 3. Had to mulligan this one, but kept a pretty decent 6. At this point, I didn't have a correct lands to play Scion on turn 2, but I decided to Subtlety the Grief. They decide to put Grief on top of their library, which I think wasn't a good decision for the opponent, because they didn't find that second black spell for a long time, or whatever they were looking for. Maybe they weren't even looking for that, but they put the Grief on top and they really weren't able to use it pretty good. So now I cycle the Lórien, I get the Stevens. This means I have Footfalls on Suspend, and now I go for the Scion, suspend another Footfalls, and pass the turn holding just a Binding at this point. Opponent decided to put the Grief on top, which put them further away from top decking that third land they needed. And I got the Subtlety. And this was fine considering I knew they had Grief in hand. So they go for the Evoke Grief again, and I get to use the Subtlety again on the Grief. This time they put it on the bottom. And yeah, so now it was time to resolve my Footfalls. This means I have lethal damage on the next turn. Opponent still doesn't have much. I think most of these versions only play like 2 Solitudes now. So they need like Solitude Ephemerate to stabilize, or Atraxa. They don't even have a blue mana at this point, and they concede the game. They don't find a solution. That was it. Okay, so let's check out the last match for the trophy. Opponent was playing Tron. They go Sylvan's Crying, grab their Tron piece. I have the classic Rhino stuff. Turn 2, ice the land. Turn 3, resolve the Rhinos. try to resolve the Rhinos at least. So they were holding 2 mana. Obviously, there was a possibility they had that counter. But I decided to go anyway, just go for the Shardless. This was, in retrospective, a mistake. Should have gone for the Outburst. They had the Warping Veil. I should have gone for the Outburst on their turn. This would be much better for me. Their turn 4 ended up them finding the Tron. And again, they were holding 2 mana. They decided to go for Dismember, so I decided to go for the Outburst immediately. Just resolve the Rhinos, pass the turn. Opponent plays the Forest, has a lot of mana right now. Goes for the Karn, finding the explosives, killing my Rhinos. So on my turn, I didn't want to let them use the explosives on 4 of my Rhino tokens, so I played the Binding before my Rhinos resolve. This way they had to use the explosives to kill 2 Rhinos ahead on the field, and I still had this one. And now I had to use the Fury to get rid of this Karn, or otherwise it would be a GG immediately. And the opponent I now left with the 2 Rhinos in the field. And opponent needs to find something. Needs to find solutions for the Rhinos, because they are 2 turn clock and they're on 8 right now. And yeah, so luckily in this game 1, those second set of Rhinos were enough to finish the game. Opponent didn't find another big threat or a solution for my Rhinos, and that was the game. Okay, so let's check out game 2. Yeah, it's a decent hand. Turn 1, Suspend Footfalls. Turn 2, I have option to go Leyline Binding, and I also top deck a Force, so pretty good. Doesn't get much better than this. Opponent goes for the Steerings. I decide to counter this. They play Forest and the Chromatic Sphere. I decide to take their Chromatic Sphere and prevent them from drawing. Just try to be aggressive, because I have suspended Rhinos. I have Rhinos resolving next turn. So if I can get them like stumble for 1 turn, that can be enough for me to take over this game. Opponent now has the Oblivion Stone. And I was feeling sorry because I used the Binding on the Chromatic Sphere now. But yeah, it just didn't matter because they had the second one. So it is kind of a perfect situation. You use the Oblivion Stone to kill everything and then get your second Oblivion Stone back. Really, really hard to beat. But I had another Shardless right now, and this means they have to spend their next turn using the Oblivion Stone again, which gives me option to maybe top deck again. Opponent unfortunately has the Karn, getting the Sundering Titan plus the Oblivion Stone. This meant I can't really get out of this. I did actually top deck a pretty good card, but I was just too far behind at this point. I try to play some more, see what will my opponent do, but they also had the Ulamog on their turn. They exiled Events and Garden. I got the Raugrin Triome, played my Violent Outburst, So I put 2 Rhinos on the field, I got the Raugrin Triome, which means I have Domain again for the next turn, and then I top decked the Scion, played my Scion, and it was like the best I could do and really a lot, but they all still had the Sundering Titan in hand, and this just wasn't enough. This just wasn't enough, and I've decided to go for the blocks here. I didn't have any chance in any way, but yeah, so that was it. Okay, let's check out the last game. The last game of the league against Tron, playing first. I keep a pretty good hand. Fire Ice, Force of Negation, Leyline Binding. I have most of the good cards I need to win this. So I went for the Lórien on turn 1, so that way I'm sure I'll have enough lands to play everything on curve. So I play the Fire Ice on Ice the land on 2, get the full domain, and to go for the Violent Outburst immediately on my turn, but still holding Force for their turn, plus the Leyline Binding when I untap. Opponent uses this Dismember, but I'm fine with them using the Dismember. Okay, so I go for another Outburst, trying to pump my Rhino token on the field, but opponent has another Dismember, but they use 2 Dismembers, this means they're already on a 12 life, and I have 8 damage for the next turn. Opponent now has the Expedition up immediately to get the Urza Mine and gets their Tron. So they're completely tapped out, this means I get to untap with the Leyline Binding and the Rhinos, attack them for 8 damage, put them on 4 life, and I decide to play my Scion in this situation. This means if they have the Ulamog or if they have like Eugen, I still have lethal for the next turn, and I was keeping Leyline Binding in hand. They had the One Ring to protect themselves for 1 turn there. Try to draw a card. I go for the ring in response. I go for the binding in response, taking their ring, preventing them from drawing a card, but they had the forest to activate their Havar Might. I top deck Lórien Revealed, which was pretty good at this point, drawing me 3 cards on this turn where I wasn't able to do anything because of the ring protection anyway. So I'm tapping next turn with the Force of Vigor and Force of Negation. It would be ideal if I got like Force of Negation and the blue card, but this is also pretty good. Opponent has a lot of cards in hand. They go for the Karn, and I'm pretty happy with this because I have the Force of Vigor. Also, we can check my sideboarding plan. In this matchup, I used 2 Force of Vigors, 4 Force of Negations. I removed Fables and Furies, they're not very useful. And that's it. So they went for the Ensnaring Bridge plan. On my turn, I have Force of Vigor to kill the bridge and finish them off. And that is it. That is the entire league. Okay, so I wasn't very experienced with this deck when I was playing this league. It was my first league with this list. Or my first or second, depending. I had a slightly different variation before, but I played different variations of this list that were very similar to this one, and I used the Beanstalk postboard with a pretty good success against Murktide, against Amulet Titan, against Shadow decks, against 4-color Omna decks, and it was primarily my idea was to use this card against the 4-color Omna decks because the deck was really struggling with that matchup. Maybe it's a bit easier now. They don't have the Delighted Halfling, so Force of Negations are a bit more impactful. I mean, a lot more impactful. than against lists that use the Delighted Halfling. But even if they have the Halfling or not, post board, when you use the Beanstalk, I think the chances of winning go like from 40% to the 60%. And also this league, I should have used the Beanstalks in that Grixis matchup. But I wasn't even sure what are they playing, and I still was my opponent kept a bad hand on game 2 anyway. It was a one-lander, so it ended up not mattering. But I think I should have done the Beanstalk thing there too. I used Beanstalk against Shadow previously. It worked out great, and they don't have a removal for this except 1-off or 2-off explosives, which means once you resolve this, you constantly through those games which tend to be a bit slower and grindier, every spell you play draws you a card, and no deck can keep with that unless they play the One Ring or Beanstalk themselves, and they don't. So it's really a spell. Once you resolve it, it's almost impossible for them to deal with. So it was a mistake not to board it there, but it ended up not mattering, and Footfalls did the job there too. Beanstalk would also do the similar thing, but yeah, it was fun, and I'm really pretty happy that I played last maybe 5 leagues with this deck. Every time I lost a trophy to the 4-color Omnat matchup, and this time I was able to play a slower game due to fact of having the Beanstalk game plan, and thanks to the Beanstalk in that game 3, that game plan, the grindy game plan of I mean knowing that eventually I'll put those Beanstalks on the field. I just have to hold on through the beginning phase, which enabled me to keep a land with 2 Leylines and 2 Force of Negations to start with, and I wouldn't be able to keep this type of hand if I had Footfalls in. But with the Beanstalks in, I don't really care about being aggressive. I can just play a slower game, grindy game, because I know I can grind them out. So you still can lose, of course. You still need to have a good hand, but I think like chances of winning in that matchup goes from 40% to like more than 50%, maybe even 60. I'm not sure. I had a pretty good score with this game plan. Also, they were kind of surprised with my game plan, which helped me win. But also, the matchup is really who has more Beanstalks on the field. Really makes it so much easier for them to win. It's even better than the One Ring, because you will mostly just be able to draw into the binding and then the forces, and then just find the solutions for the ring. And it's much harder to find solutions with the Beanstalk, because you can usually just put so much of them on the field using the cascade spells, and that's it. Okay, so Force of Vigors, 4 of them on the sideboard, because they are also very relevant. I use them in the 4-color Omnat matchup, but also using them against Amulet Titan, which has been pretty popular right now. And I'm also considering adding Drenit Magistrate to the sideboard for the Living End matchup, but it hasn't been that popular at the moment, and the sideboard is pretty packed right now as it is. So that's it for now. This is my final list going forward, and thank you for watching. Just a friendly reminder to click like, click subscribe, comment in the video, especially if you have played the list, and especially I want to know how well did you do against these mid-range matchups, boarding the Beanstalks in your post-board games, surprising your opponent when they're holding engineered explosives on the field, plus Flusterstorm in the hand, and you cascade into the Beanstalk and just go on to the second game plan of outvaluing your opponent with the Beanstalk triggers. So I just want to mention that in most of these grindy games, I tend to board out 3 Footfalls and leave 1 in just to have more of these cascade targets, because these games tend to get really grindy. I don't want to get out of the cascade targets. So having 5 of them can be relevant, and rarely, but can be. So that's it for today, and again, thank you for watching, and goodbye.